Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th, and CMU Public Broadcasting again brings you Meet the Candidates, the election year series that gives you the chance to meet those seeking state and national office.
Support of WCMU is provided by Flint Institute of Arts, presenting Drawing Together International Cartoons. The exhibition features 300 cartoons from the Iden-Doan Foundation International Competition and runs through December 30th. FlintArts.org.
Welcome to this edition of Meet the Candidates. I'm Mike Horace, and we're joined this time by State Representative Woodrow Stanley, Democratic candidate for Michigan's 34th State House District. He's seeking re-election to a third term. Mr. Representative, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike, for the invitation.
In our first few minutes, can you give us some background about you and talk about the experience you're bringing to this campaign?
Well, I grew up here in the city of Flint, went to elementary, high school, attended and graduated from Mott Community College as well as the University of Michigan. Worked as an employment and training administrator for a number of years, as a counselor and a teacher for some years. Served on the Flint City Council, served 3 terms as mayor, served on the County Board of Commissioners, and of course now serving in the House. And so I bring a lifetime of service to of this community. Of particular interest is the kind of services that I've tried to provide to young people. I've had a foundation that awards scholarships and enrichment grants to deserving young people and students and youth serving organizations in our area for, over 20 years now. And so I've been an advocate for the people of this community for a long time.
Tell us about your State House District. Give us an outline of where it is geographically, and has it changed given the redistricting that we just went through? Well,
essentially my district is entirely in the city of Flint. It's most of the northwest part of the city, and now it takes in a part of the east side of Flint, as well as a part of the south side of the Flint, south side of Flint, all the way to Atherton Road. So I have a good section of the city, middle portion of the city, the far north and west part of the city. Interestingly, this is an area that I've served as mayor and as a member of the County Board of Commissioners. So I'm not unfamiliar with not only the issues in the area, but the individuals. I've known many for many years.
You've been in the state legislature for 4 years now. What are some things you can point to as accomplishments that you're particularly proud of?
Well, certainly being able to provide a level of services to citizens in terms of citizens calling to get particular issues addressed. I pride myself on me and my staff being able to respond in an efficient manner to the citizens' interests. The kinds of legislative issues that I've tried to champion. One in particular, and quite frankly, it has been passed into law, not under my signature, over my signature, but during this Republican legislature, and that is no reason absentee balloting. Now, this is a piece of legislation that essentially takes the thing that we do to residents now, in that if you are going to be absent from the city, or there's some reason that you can't vote in person, that you can vote absentee, and we limit the reasons to 4 to 5 reasons. Well, my bill essentially said that you shouldn't have to provide a reason. If you're going to be unable to vote on election day, you should be able to, without reason, you should be able to get an absentee ballot. So that bill has become law. Again, as I said, not over my sponsorship, but certainly I agree with the notion that we should have no reason absentee.
What are some of the big issues for people in your district come this election cycle?
Well, of course, when you look at the landscape in my district, You're talking about issues that really mirror a lot of the issues in urban communities across the state of Michigan and perhaps even across our country. Issues of employment or unemployment, more accurately, issues of crime. Certainly there are concerns about education, but all of those are wrapped up in the one issue, and that is a lack of economic development. And again, the lack of revenue to support basic services. Each month, I generally host 1 or 2 coffee hours where members of my district can come and talk to me about whatever concerns that they have. And I can tell you, Mike, that more often than not, they're not talking about state issues, they're talking about local issues. And most of those issues are the need to demolish housing, the need for more police protection and fire protection, the need for jobs. And so a lot of these are really tied into the need for more revenue. And I think that what we've seen, at least over the last 2 years under the Republican leadership in the governor's mansion and in the House and the Senate, is a real shift, from trying to work with local communities to shifting the tax burden on local communities. And there are a number of examples that I can cite that bear out that, in terms of, for instance, the significant cut in revenue sharing. There's a proposal to eliminate the personal property tax, which is a source of revenue for counties and cities, a slash of about $470 per pupil to K through 12 education. And so each of these, and then I should balance that with over $1.8 billion in tax rewards to big corporate concerns. And so I believe what we've seen is a significant shift of tax burden onto local residents, and the state sort of backing out of its share of supporting and being a partner with local communities.
So what can the legislature do to fix this revenue issue, to correct this imbalance that we have?
Mike, what I think it is, it's a matter of priorities. Obviously, if you talk to my counterparts, they're going to say, well, you've got to get revenue from somewhere. So for me, it's a matter of priorities. For instance, I wouldn't have necessarily proposed that we tax seniors, the pension tax. I wouldn't propose that because, again, I think that reflects a misguided priority. You have individuals who worked all of their lives with the expectation that in the sunset years of their lives that they're going to be able to reap some of what they have stored up, their pensions. And so for me, to see our legislature go in and raid and undercut that, it's more than bad politics. I think it's immoral, quite frankly. So I think what I'm more interested in is trying to make sure that whatever sources of revenue are balanced. Let's look at across the board, perhaps, income tax bump. Because income tax is a more progressive kind of a tax that only tax those individuals that have some income and can pay it. But when we have such a reliance on, and we have that here being played out in the city of Flint, where there is a $6 million public safety millage on the ballot this November 6th, that is a property tax. And so those individuals who own property, seniors, middle income, but you have a number of different income levels there, and so it hits unevenly. And I think that we have to have a balanced approach to trying to raise revenue, and Mike, we have to make sure that places like Flint and the urban cities, which are the hub of these regional economies, these communities have to be healthy. They have to be strong. Who ever heard of being a suburb of a dark hole, a nothing? A suburb has to be attached to something, and hopefully it's attached to something that's healthy, that's vibrant, that contributes to that regional economy.
Very briefly, you mentioned education as one of your big issues. Is it time for us to revisit the funding structure for public education in Michigan?
Well, certainly. I think the reliance on property tax as one source of revenue is way overdue to review how we fund public education. But the vehicle of funding it, I think, may be and I don't want to say it's of less concern, but for me, is do we have a commitment? We talk about that we no longer are competing with Iowa or California or Arkansas, but in fact, we're competing with kids in India and China and so forth. But more often than not, what I see is that those are empty words, because when you examine the budgets don't reflect that those words are a priority. If you have a $470 per pupil cut in education, elementary education, that's not a priority. And so I just think that we have to be willing to say kids are in fact a priority, and when you examine the budget, that budget should reflect that in fact kids are our #1 priority.
In our final moment we have here, make your final pitch. What message do you want to leave voters with? Well,
I certainly believe that my constituents deserve the best possible leadership. They deserve experienced leadership within the legislature. They deserve to have someone that's committed to be an advocate for them. I've tried to be that during my tenure in the legislature, and will continue to do so if I'm given the opportunity to continue to serve the people of the 34th District.
Representative Stanley, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Michael.
And our guest this time has been State Representative Woodrow Stanley. He's running for re-election as a Democrat in Michigan's 34th State House District. And a reminder, you can find our entire Meet the Candidates series on our website, WCMU.org. And come November 6th, please exercise your right to vote. For everybody at CMU Public Broadcasting, I'm Mike Horace. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for Meet the Candidates. CMU Public Broadcasting invited both major party candidates for this office to participate in this series.
Welcome to this edition of Meet the Candidates. I'm Mike Horace, and we're joined today by Dan Kildee. He is the Democrat running for Michigan's open 5th Congressional District. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
In our first few minutes, can you give us some background about yourself and talk about the experience you're bringing to this campaign?
Sure. I was born and raised here in Flint, Michigan. Spent a good deal of my life in public service. I was elected to the Board of Education when I was 18 years old, right out of high school. Served on the County Board of Commissioners, led the County Board as its chair. Probably the biggest thing I did at that level was help to develop the Bishop International Airport, which is one of the fastest growing airports in the country. Then I was the county treasurer for 13 years, developed the land bank concept here in Flint, and it's a concept that now is in use in about 40 counties around the state and another 50 or so communities around the country. And then for the last 3 years or so, I've been the president of a national nonprofit organization called the Center for Community Progress, based in Washington, Flint, and New Orleans, Louisiana. So my work has been, for the most part, public service. You know, I did other things when I was going to college. I worked at a children's agency working with emotionally disturbed kids. So I have a record that I think is either community service, public service, nonprofit sector kind of work.
This congressional district, the 5th, was redrawn in the redistricting process. Tell us about the district. What is the geography of it?
Well, it's a pretty diverse district. It's with the reapportionment, it actually got a little bit bigger than it had been because Michigan lost 1 seat. So the district now includes all of Genesee County, a big part of Saginaw County, including the city of Saginaw, a little part of Tuscola, and then all of Bay County, all of Aranac County, and all of Iosco County. So it basically is Fenton and Linden on the very southern end of the district, straight up to Oscoda. It's a really diverse district. Old industrial cities, small towns, some agricultural land, pretty significant, very productive agricultural areas, and then some small resort towns as well. So it's a really diverse congressional district.
This is an open seat this year. Tell us, what are some of your priorities going to be should you be elected?
I think the biggest priority for anybody running for office this year, but especially in mid-Michigan, is the economy and getting jobs, getting economic growth back into our region. We've had nationally a recession, but even worse over the last couple of decades, a serious retraction in manufacturing within this region. So the biggest and most significant priority that I'll try to address is to get federal policy to recognize the importance of the heartland of Michigan's older industrial cities, particularly Flint, Saginaw, Bay City, but also the other opportunities that we have to convert our productive capacity to jobs, agriculture being a really big one.
So in these urban cities you have in your district, how do you bring manufacturing back? How do you start encouraging that economic development?
Well, I think number one, it starts with the recognition that manufacturing and increasing exports based on manufacturing is an important national priority. We have the capacity here. We've got the facilities, we've got the technology, we've got the sort of manufacturing legacy, and we have the workforce. What we need is trade policy at the national level that prioritizes American-made goods and protects and supports American companies from basically offshore interests flooding our markets with cheap products built with really low-cost labor with no environmental standards. So we start with an even playing field when it comes to international trade, something that we don't have right now. From that, I think we need to continue to support research and development of advanced manufacturing, fuel cell technology, battery technology, particularly in our area. The kind of growth in manufacturing that's related to the next generation of automobiles, I think, is an important potential area of growth, but not the only one we want to focus on. When we encourage innovation and encourage manufacturing and in fact encourage the research and development of new products, I think what we can do is translate the productive capacity that we have here to jobs for our people. And the federal government needs to be a strong partner in doing that.
You mentioned leveling the playing field. How do we go about doing that? Do we need to revisit NAFTA, for example?
Well, I think NAFTA was bad policy. So, I mean, my thinking is that whenever we look at these international trade agreements, we have to make sure what we're agreeing to. If the agreement is one that requires our trading partners to have the same environmental standards that our domestic producers are required to meet, and the same labor standards, and in the case of Japan, for example, they don't use non-tariff barriers, technical tweaks to their requirements for vehicles, for example, to keep our products out while theirs come in. Fair trade and free trade is important, but so far, I have not yet seen any of these agreements that provide an even playing field. It's always been tilted so that it's more difficult for our manufacturers to sell our products overseas and much easier for those trading partners to sell their products here. And then, of course, you know, there's all sorts of other ways that other countries are able to create an unfair playing field by manipulating their currency and taking actions that make it really difficult for us to compete. We don't want to close off our borders to trade. We want to participate in this global economy. But we just have to start with the premise that unless the playing field is even, we can't let other countries dump their products into our markets and not have the same opportunity to sell products into theirs.
We've talked about the importance of manufacturing to Michigan. The urban cores in Michigan obviously having a lot of trouble over the last couple of decades. What else can be done from the national level to help these urban cores? I
think one, for sure, is to get the federal government to think differently about how we support cities. If you look at Flint, Saginaw especially, these are cities that have had significant population loss as a result of sprawl, but primarily as the result of disinvestment in manufacturing. So we can't have federal law that only supports communities that are in a constant state of growth and expansion. And if you look at the way federal government funds its support of cities, typically, whether it's for housing or for transportation services or new infrastructure, things of that nature, the federal government rewards growing communities, which in the short term it might make some logic, but in the long term it works against our national interest. So first thing we have to do is get the federal government to recognize that a city that once had 200,000 people, like Flint for example, but maybe now has 100,000, shouldn't be penalized because it still is critical to the future of this region. We've got to be able to reinvest in those places, clean up the abandonment, clean up the empty buildings, tear down the empty houses, redevelop new infrastructure so that those places can compete again in the next century to be the next job producer and not simply decide that these cities have had their life and that life is now over with.
You've been on the campaign trail for over a year now. What other issues are you hearing when you're out talking to people in your communities? What are they concerned about?
Well, obviously, as I said, jobs is number one, but I think the overall question of sort of economic uncertainty is the pervasive theme. Seniors are concerned about Social Security and Medicare. There's a lot of discussion at the national level about what the future of those programs looks like. We have to keep the promise to those seniors and to the next generation of seniors that come along, and I'm one of them. The baby boomers, they're coming this way. We can't have a sustainable society if we're going to just protect the generation that's here now but leave the next generation to fend for themselves. I think the other big area of uncertainty that I hear about is parents, especially parents and grandparents, thinking about the next generation. Are they going to be able to afford college? Cost of college continues to go up. Student loan debt now is greater than credit card debt in this country. So that is a big one that I think we have to take on. We have to be willing to invest in our future.
Let's pause on that one for a moment. How do we start addressing this student loan debt crisis we have?
Well, number one, we've got to reduce the direct cost of students for college education. And unfortunately, the Congress, at least the Republicans in Congress, want to go in the other direction. They want to cut Pell Grants. They want to increase or have been willing to allow for the increase in the cost of student loans. So starting with greater direct support for students, for young people who are willing to invest in their skills by going to college to reduce the cost of education in the first place. And we see this at the state and federal level. States are pulling back on their direct support for public universities. That just can't be sustained. Secondly, as I mentioned this already, the federal government does have a legitimate role in making sure the cost of a student loan is very, very low. We have a national interest in young people being able to go to college and increase their skills. It's not about giving something away. This is an investment that is in our national interest, and we have to be willing to invest with that kind of support in order to win the future.
And briefly, you mentioned Social Security as well. How do we guarantee that for future generations? How do we shore up the system?
Well, one of the things I think we have to look at is the current cap on income that is subject to the Social Security tax. Back in 1983, the last time there was, or one of the last times there was a major effort to fix Social Security, Alan Greenspan concluded that if we had 90% of the income generated in this country subject to the Social Security tax, that Social Security would be solvent as far as the eye could see. Unfortunately, because more and more of the wealth generated in this country is going to the absolute richest people in the country, less of the income that is generated is subject to Social Security tax. Today, only 84% of the income in this country is subject to Social Security tax. So we can't reduce benefits. That would not have the effect that we want. I don't believe that the country is ready to means test Social Security so that some don't get it but some do. But what we can do is increase the cap on the amount of income that is subject to the Social Security tax, and that will make Social Security solvent for the foreseeable future.
We only have a minute or so left, so I'm going to ask you to make your final pitch to voters. What message would you like them to walk away from this interview with?
Well, if they're looking for somebody who has a history of being a bipartisan player. I mean, the work that I've done over the years in the Michigan legislature, not as a member, but as an advocate for new law, has resulted in Democrats and Republicans coming on board. The same thing in other state legislatures where I've done work. If they're looking for somebody who is willing to be bipartisan and is focused on being a problem solver and has a history of coming up with new, innovative solutions, then I'm the choice that they ought to be looking for.
All right, Mr. Kildee, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Our guest this time has been Dan Kildee, a Democratic candidate for Michigan's 5th Congressional District. That seat is open this November. And a reminder, you can find our entire Meet the Candidates series on our website, WCMU.org. And come November 6th, please remember to exercise your right to vote. For everybody at CMU Public Broadcasting, I'm Mike Horace. Thanks for joining us.
This has been Meet the Candidates, a production of CMU Public Broadcasting. Both major party candidates were invited to participate in this series. For a complete listing of the air dates and times for this series, or to watch or listen to this program again, go to our website, WCMU.org.
Support of WCMU is provided by Flint Institute of Arts, presenting Drawing Together International Cartoons. The exhibition features 300 cartoons from the Iden Foundation International Competition and runs through December 30th. FlintArts.org.